Good morning, good morning, good morning, Buffalo. This is Blueprint to Culture. I am your host, Talia Johnson Huff, and I'm excited here on this Thursday, just coming down from the impact, the excitement of the Upstate New York Rochester Regional MWBE Conference that was held in Rochester, New York, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And it was an amazing time. Shout out to the city of Rochester, also to Timothy Howard, the director of purchasing, and the team. It was an amazing, amazing time. Great connections, great momentum, and just super excited to be back in Buffalo and getting back in the trenches, working with minority women and veteran-owned companies. And speaking of minority and women and veteran-owned companies and the Buffalo Niagara MWBE and SDVOB capacity building training program, we have Miss Kasey joining us today, and she is a part of our cohort. We call it the Lit Cohort. And so, Kasey, welcome to Blueprint the Culture. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. The conference this weekend was amazing.
Yes.
There was so many vendors out, and there were so many small businesses and just so many powerhouses here in Western New York that showed up. It was just great to be in a room filled with people that think creatively and that want to just grow their business.
I'm so glad you showed up. So, it was awesome to be able to see, members from the cohort. And I'm sorry, microphone check 1 2 1 2. It was just amazing to see, the members of the cohort there, and just being in the midst of the movement of what it looks like at the Upstate New York conference, regional conference. And the beautiful thing about the Rochester conference, Kasey, as I'm sure you've seen, is that it's a blend of different regions. Mm-hmm. So, you're able to meet those from Western New York, from Rochester, from the Finger Lakes, from Southern Tier, from Syracuse. And that's where we all come together and introduce the new businesses that we've come in contact with from our region. We bring them to the other regions because most of us, like myself, we work up and down New York State, and so even you, as I'm going to digress and let you talk about it a little bit, you're not from Buffalo.
No, I'm not.
And yet you're here building. So shout out to you for choosing Buffalo as a home to build in. Tell us about you, Kasey, and what you do.
So as Talia mentioned, I'm not from Buffalo. I'm originally from Queens. That's where I was born and grew up in. And I found my way to Buffalo about 6 years ago. And since being in Buffalo, I really just have been welcomed to a community, and I've just found that people want to help people. It really is the city of neighbors.
Yeah.
And it's different. Coming from downstate, people are so competitive, and people, you'll go to them with an idea and they'll be like, oh, that's cute, and then come back to me. And it's like, come back to me when it's, all up and running, but don't want to help you figure out those in-between steps. And then I found here in Buffalo that people really will do that and really help you out and give you mentorship and encourage you and the resources you need.
That's so awesome to hear because, I share, and the little bit we've talked, I feel like we probably had meetings more than anyone else in the cohort. Y'all don't be mad at me. I still love each and every one of y'all. Shout out to the cohort. Shout out to the Lit Cohort. Yeah. We love y'all. We gathered last night and we missed you, but we were diving deeper into the money aspect. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But Kasey, it has not always been that way in the city, especially for women. And so to hear now that we are changing, that we're evolving, that we're growing, that we're opening up our arms, to different businesses from different places, is amazing to me because we truly are the city of good neighbors here in Buffalo. And there's some amazing people who do amazing things here that do it under the radar.
Yes.
And that's the most amazing part of Buffalo. That's why I love Buffalo, and there's so much opportunity here. So tell me a little bit about, because you don't necessarily have it's a business, but it's not traditional. Kasey is the only nonprofit organization in the Lit Cohort. And how was that? Tell me about that experience, being the only nonprofit.
Being the only nonprofit, it gives you a unique perspective because everything that's taught in the cohort, while it may not be directly applicable, it's still the concepts that are. Yeah. And so you have to remember that too. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, and what I've certainly realized being in the nonprofit space for a few years, is that people go into nonprofit space not realizing that there's also a business side to it.
Yeah.
And you have to think about that because, especially I think now, people are realizing that if one funding source goes away, do I have a backup?
Yeah.
You know, what have I done? And with this cohort, that sort of exposes us to making sure that we're prepared and we have backups for when something happens, because you do have to prepare for that. You know, you have to prepare that in your personal life, but also your professional life too, for a rainy day, because it's gonna happen. It's not a matter of if, but when.
But when. Yeah, that's so important. And I love that you said that, because your perspective is, I always say, like, I can speak.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk about, you know, the impact and what we want, you know, businesses to walk away with. But to hear it from the mouth of those who are being impacted is so important. And so I love that. I'm grateful for this platform, first of all, to be able to share those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
because it is so important. There's so many ways of to gain education. There's so many classes and groups and gatherings of businesses out, which is all great. But sometimes it is hard to, you know, find where you actually belong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because there's programs you may go into and they don't fit your style
Mm-hmm.
or your speed or, you know, your vibe. Because everything we do at the Lit Cohort is a vibe.
Yeah.
It's all about a vibe. And so, you know, it's important to know that, like, in here, I noticed that this team works together like a family.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, I'm not that old, first of all, but it feels like, you know, sitting around the dinner table, just like chatting and gathering information. So I want to talk about more about your nonprofit and the fact that it is launched, it is here, you're doing amazing things. You're not just talking about it, you are being about it, and you are everywhere.
Yes.
You are everywhere. Can you tell us about the name of the nonprofit, what it is, where it is, and how people can get connected to it?
Yeah. So the nonprofit is called the Agnes Youth and Family Center. It is named in honor of my grandmother.
Oh,
Yes.
love that.
We are at 15 East Utica Street. And so what we have done over the last year is we did several community events. So we did a few trunk or treats, a brunch with Santa, and most importantly, we did a food and clothing access pilot program in our neighborhood.
Awesome.
While we were preparing to get our certificate of occupancy for our building. So then this year we're going to be preparing to launch our childcare. And the way people can get involved is by, you know, following us on social media. You know, people don't think it, but that's a big thing. If you follow us, you share our stuff, you comment on us, you ask me, like, how can I get involved? How can I help you with planning? You know, just those simple things, and not necessarily monetarily, but just you showing up means a lot too. So, you know, going on our social medias, going on our website, our emails there, my contacts there, you know, and you fill it out and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I love that. Can you tell, so what is your social media handle?
So our social media on Facebook is just our name, Agnes Youth and Family Center.
Okay.
And then on Instagram, it's agnes.yfc.
Okay.
And then our LinkedIn is just our name, and that is also getting worked on right now. So I
That's
have our
okay.
social media team
That's-
working on that.
Yes.
And then on our website, it's just agnesyouthfamilycenter.org.
Okay.
You can find us on our website.
Okay. And to learn more information about Kasey and the Agnes Youth and Family Center, I'm going to make sure that I have their capacity building page will have your information on there. So if you want to get involved, you know, you have a goal in mind.
I do.
Can we talk about that goal and what
Yeah.
this is for? Like, let's get to the goal, because we
Yeah.
need to make sure that you get up and running, because we do have a lack of daycare.
Yes,
But
we do.
It
It is a crisis.
It's a crisis. Like, we are in crisis, and Senator April Baskin was really rallying for that. You know, she just talked about that at the Buffalo Niagara Partnership Legislative Lunch. She was talking about, you know, access to daycare services for families and how important that is. And then also, you know, by day I put on a cape, and I'm at the Erie County Industrial Development Agency, and so we had loans, revolving lines of credit available to daycare was one of them, because there is underfunded. So
Yes.
talk about what you need and how we can get you what you need. And once we get you what you need, what does that do for the community?
Right. So we do have a daycare crisis. Let's talk about a little bit about that. Let's talk about the numbers a little bit.
Come on, numbers.
I mean, there's a little bit over 51,000 kids under the age of 5 here in Erie County, but there's yet only a little bit over 28,000 licensed slots. That's
Wow.
a massive gap.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up what Senator April Baskin is doing. because she did have a round table, and at that round table, the providers were there, and we talked about our issues. And a lot of the issues is the lag in reimbursement with DSS. You know, they're technically supposed to pay us within 15 to 30 days of service, but yet it's taking 60 days.
Wow.
And what is that doing? It's not sustainable for a lot of providers. You know, how do we pay our rent, our utilities, our staff? Providers talked about going 2 or 3 weeks without paying themselves to pay their staff, but then what happens at home? Now they're stressed and they have to show up.
Come on. Trickle down effect.
Yes. And then the other problem, you know, we discussed was staffing. You know, those ratio mandates that we have from the state that we have to be in compliance with. So we are forced to make sure we have X amount of staff, and making sure that they have the training requirement, because that's also some of the red tape is that you can have the staff, but then you have all these trainings and that costs money too.
Yes.
And so with a nonprofit though, I like how you did mention the revolving line of credit you have.
Yeah.
But some other barriers to
Come
that
on,
people need to talk about is that if you are just starting, you can't access those because you need to be quote unquote in business operationally making money, not just because technically we've been operational, but it's been volunteer based for a very long, for like the last year, but it needs to be operational, cash flowing for a year or two before you really have access to those resources. So then what are you having to do? And with a nonprofit, it's different because, you know, when you're doing your own business, you can go and get a personal line of credit, a loan, there's other options. But with a nonprofit, there's really nothing. You have to fundraise that. You have to look out to your board. You have to look out to sponsors. You have to look at those small businesses, figure out, you know, how can we help the community? And, you know, I've been fortunate enough that some small businesses on Elmwood allowed me, and currently selling like bracelets at checkout, so this way we can fundraise some money to get the nonprofit running, because we were fortunate enough to receive grants and sponsorships to get the furniture and build our fence. So we're in the process of doing that now to get it up and ready, but then we're still with the staffing issue of like the gap in cost because of the fact that they take 60 days. And not when you're talking about a 14-day gap compared to a 60-day gap, you're talking a lot of difference and a lot of money too.
Absolutely. And go ahead and shout out your sponsors.
Oh,
that's important.
yeah, M&T Bank, M&T Bank, big shout out to them. They were able to give us a grant so we can purchase the classroom materials and manipulatives. Awesome. Same thing with products, they gave us a grant so we can purchase our educational materials as well. National Fuel also gave us, they donated us some blankets, and then they also gave us some funds so we can do that. But they're also coming out in April to help us build our playground.
Come on, see, listen. Sponsorship, grant dollars, all of it is what powers the ecosystem that we all live in, that we all thrive in. And one of the most important things, I mean, everyone's important, we know that, but our children are important, because if you don't have daycare, it's very difficult for people to go to work, to be able to operate, you know, to be able to, you know, sometimes those kids, and I'm not talking about anyone, but sometimes those kids only get a meal at daycare. You don't know what's going on at home. So it's just like when they go to school, like they're relying on that breakfast, they're relying on that lunch, and it's the same thing with the daycare. So thank you for being one of those providers. And you're not just doing a regular daycare, you're also doing
support services. And that really comes from my background, because my background, I have my bachelor's in early ed, and I'm getting my master's in social work. I have that in May, so I'm a month away. But, you know, I was a teacher for a little bit over a year, and then I was a case manager for a while with children and families, and right now I'm a counselor with children and families.
Okay.
So I've worked one-on-one with families, and I've also worked and I've seen the barriers that they face constantly. Absolutely. But I also came from a working class family too, so like I'm not shy to that either.
Yeah.
And what we were really doing was providing access to services. We're providing food on site, we're providing clothing on site. Through our collaboration with a mental health provider called C. Canefield Counseling, we're able to provide mental health on site. And it's needed, because one of the things you do face in a classroom is, you know, classroom disruptions. If a kid is acting out or having a behavior, there's nothing wrong with that, but guess what? If you don't have that extra set of hands, you have to stop your lesson plan. You know, you have to stop what you're doing to de-escalate the situation, and it's not fair for the other kids either to lose out on that time. So making sure that you have the supports there in place is so vitally important when you are opening a child care facility, and thinking about all the things that come with it too, and not just being like, oh, I want to open and, you know, I'm here, but really thinking about intentionally, what does this look like? You know, what are the things they need to succeed, not just there. And, let's see if you can do it or not.
That's so amazing. And the way that you explain it and break it down is what I love the most. Because the services are awesome, but sometimes I think people don't understand what goes into opening a business in general. But when you're talking about as a nonprofit, I love that you talked about access to funds. And okay, there are loans available, there are grants available, but sometimes because of circumstances, you don't even qualify.
No.
And so it's like, it's available, but how do I have access to it? So is there a way to be able to help nonprofits and these early stage businesses get access to these programs without having to jump through these hoops? Because we get it, right? It's a loan. So we need to be able to prove that you can pay the money back. But what can we do? And I don't know, that's a question that I'm posing to, those who are providing funding. What can we do?
You could do like a small grassroots fund. You don't have to give like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you can do a small 5, 10, 20, or you could base it on need. A daycare has different needs, obviously, than if you're just doing like after school care or coaching or doing classes and stuff like that. But really, that's something you could do. You could do a separate process for that, or you could have certain funds allocated for that in the sponsorship way that may be better, or something you can even do. Businesses could do roundups. It doesn't really cost them anything, but it doesn't cost them anything, but yet they could still get a tax write-off through that.
Yeah, that's so important. I'm so glad you said that, because I've been sharing that with people since we met.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, are you interested in doing a roundup for a nonprofit organization? Because every single time I see it, I'm rounding up. It's like, It's not going to cost. First of all, I don't even want that change in my purse, dangling in my purse. First of all, because it's deactivating those cards that y'all got. So first of all, make sure y'all understand that. But the other thing is, it's not hurting you to be able to help a cause. So we do need more businesses who are comfortable with the roundup. And the roundup simply means that when someone goes to check out, if their cost is $9.82, the remainder of that to get to $10 will go to that nonprofit. That is something that we think is so small, but it's super helpful.
It is, and people don't realize it. I've heard nonprofits be involved in roundups where, just doing a month of roundups, like they were like, oh my God, this really is going to get us through the next couple of months, or this is going to be able to provide so much, and it alleviates the stress. And I think that's also something people don't really talk about, the stress that small business owners and nonprofits are experiencing right now. It's like, we are trying so hard, but there's so many things. It's like every day there's something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's life, and us understanding that people in business, people who are running orgs, people who are doing this are regular people.
Yeah.
I said that on Channel 7 when I was talking to Ed. I'm like, these business owners that we're working with, these are regular, everyday people who have bills and raising children and homes and, have car notes and all of the things. So they're not superhuman because we decided to step out and start a business. You are fixing a problem. So when you open a business, you are solving a problem. When you open a nonprofit is literally the epitome of solving a problem. That is the entire reason that you exist, right? So it's so important that that you talked about that. I love that you said it. I want to expound a little bit on your why.
Yeah, so I like that you said the problem, because really what we're solving is the lack of kindergarten readiness here in Western New York, but also it's kind of nationwide at this point too, I would say.
It definitely is.
Only 51% of kids are finishing kindergarten on track. It's still a huge gap.
It's a really big gap.
And, what we do that's so special is, with working with our program committees, we're designing a Montessori play-based informed curriculum. And the way I got that was because I was an intern at the Research Institute at Buffalo, and they do a research informed. So they're constantly updating it to be, the best aligned with the research methods. And I was like, we could do the same thing. Why can't we? So we can do our own research informed curriculum. All people on our committees, they either have a teaching degree or a doctorate degree in education. And with the 5 of us, we can wrap our brains together and we can do this. A lot of them do have experience too in early education. One of them has been early education teacher for 9 years. So why not? Why can't we do this? Why can't we intentionally design and plan a curriculum to give teachers so they feel supported, to know that they also have the support of a program committee there to have their back if they have a question, and they have supported me, but I did put that program committee for a reason, because I am one person.
Yes. That's important.
Yeah.
That's important to remember. Everything you said is important, but it's so important to remember that burnout is real.
Yeah.
Burnout is real, and in the nonprofit space, the numbers of burnout are high. We talked a little bit last night. The cohort, we met for an hour on Zoom, and we were really going over our pricing, like making sure that we get our prices in order and that we're comfortable for when we dive into this cash flow class on April 15th. However, you missed it, but it's a recording. It turned into a mental health conversation. I don't even know where we went. I think Mayraki, Erica started it. I'm blaming it on her. But it took a turn because Deja is a psychiatrist. And so she was sharing about how we don't even know that sometimes you can have a manic episode multiple times throughout the day and don't even realize it. Like, you're having these because of what you're dealing with, the stress of building this, and the passion behind it. On top of the stress becomes almost like a volcano. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage that? Because I know a little bit more about your story that you have not shared, and I don't need you to.
I can get into it
because it's a lot building and being broken and like having to rebuild. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we only have 6 minutes left, but I'll give it to you.
So a little bit about how I found my way up here in Buffalo is when I was a senior in high school, my high school boyfriend at the time, his name was Dan. He got diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately. But determined as hell to come to college.
Yes.
So he was in remission for about a month, and he's like, I still want to go away. So he got into UB. I followed with him, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So then it was a blessing in disguise though, because his cancer came back and he passed away. But I came back to Buffalo because I still had a degree to finish, and I still had goals and aspirations, and I really needed the change of environment.
Yeah.
So like even when there would be winter breaks, I would stay on campus. I got a job here. And I kind of just found my new community. And that's why I also wanted to start this nonprofit here, because Buffalo gave so much to me. I want to get back to Buffalo.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. You took tragedy and you turned it into triumph and found your way. And a lot of people are unable to do that. Mm-hmm. And so kudos to you for that tenacity and just not stopping. And then also in the midst of it, giving back. That's so important, because sometimes we are so focused on self that we can't see what our purpose is. And you fell into your purpose here in Buffalo.
Well, I give that back to Dan, because he thought because he didn't have a child that he wasn't leaving behind a legacy. So we had a lot of conversations of what a legacy means. And it really comes down to the impact you have on people, like when you're gone, it's like, what do people remember? Not if you were like a nasty person, they'll remember that, but what did you do for them that like changed their life?
Come on, Kasey, preach to us.
So like I think it was always important for me, where I was at in my life going into my career, thinking about that too, of never forgetting where you come from as well, and making sure you're always giving back to your community as well.
Yeah, that's beyond amazing. I love your story. When I heard it, I was like, it makes me emotional, and I didn't even experience it, but your tenacity, and I'm sitting across from you, and if you're just listening, and you make sure you go back and watch it so you can see Kasey's little baby face. She is so cute. She literally looks like she's 12, and she's not. She's a grown, educated woman, as you can hear, and she is helping to build our community. Lee looking, trying to see, so you see. And he's like, let me see her. She a baby, right, Lee? Shout out to you and to the Agnes Youth and Family Center and all that you're doing in the community and will continue to do in the community. And with that being said, what do you want to say to those who are listening right now? If you could say anything, like, don't be cursing and stuff. If you could say anything, like, what is it that you would like to say to the community in Buffalo and surrounding areas?
I would tell them, I may have been a little quiet at first while I was finding my way here, but I'm here to stay.
Hello.
And I'm so excited to eventually, when the Agnes Center opens, I'll work with more daycare center. Like, that brings me so much joy. Like, I love working with littles. I don't know what it is. It just like makes me so happy.
You know what? Kids are inspiring, and I was going through probably depression. I don't know what to call it because it's just kind of like being a Black woman. I don't know. It just is what it is. It's just like I woke up like this vibe, but I was going through a season, a day, multiple days. And I was just kind of overwhelmed with being a builder and sometimes being shunned because I'm not that young, but I'm younger than a lot of those who still do what I do and are kind of, I don't know, whatever, like upset that I step into myself and into this lane and it's like I run with it. But I've been doing this my whole life, right? And it's like, this is who I am. This is my purpose. So I can't stop. And so sometimes I'm like a wrecking ball, literally.
Unapologetically yourself.
Yes, very unapologetically me. And so sometimes it is overwhelming because everyone is not comfortable with you. And I've learned that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, especially when your purpose is doing things that are uncomfortable. Because I am chosen to pull out of people what sometimes they don't see in themselves, right? And so in doing that, it is very difficult. And so I was having a day. And I went back to the M&T and Tech event where I was working with high school kids. And they wrote me 30 letters of appreciation and how they felt about me. And that helped. And so in closing, as we have like 40 seconds to wrap up, I want to shout out to Buffalo Public Schools, to Erin Selwig and Julie Johnson and the M&T Young Women in Tech for having me and for partnering with me and all that we have coming up and going on because those girls helped me. And shout out to each and every one of those students who took the time to write those 30 messages for me. And just so you know, they are on the TaliaHuff.com website because that was powerful and that helped. Kasey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
More
having
to
me.
come on Kasey and the Agnes Family and Youth and Family Center and the opening and all the things that we will be doing. So thank you. I love y'all.
I love you. Bye.